bought and paid for with that divorce money." Mama's words hit me like a slap as I stood in her doorway, clutching my framed diploma. The kitchen smelled of barbecue, laughter spilling out like knives, while my own son grinned in their group photo from the family chat, time-stamped for the exact moment I crossed the stage alone. 27 years of night shifts and textbooks reduced to a family joke. I tasted copper but kept my chin high. They thought I'd crawl away ashamed. They forgot I've been documenting every lie, every theft, every sneer. And now, with proof sharper than their gossip, I was about to turn their mockery into my power, if I could survive what comes next. My name is Vanessa Monroe, and I'm 45 years old. These days, I sit in my tiny home office, surrounded by psychology textbooks and the diploma that took 27 years to earn. Working night shifts at the hospital while raising my son Marcus taught me to document everything. Every slight, every lie, every forgotten promise from Mama and my sisters Janet and Louise. The polyester graduation gown still hangs in my closet, its scratch against my skin as fresh as the echo of empty seats in that vast auditorium. Mama always said I was reaching above my station whenever I aced a class, while my sisters nodded along like backup singers to her criticism. My fingers traced the brass frame holding my degree, each credit hard-won between double shifts and daycare bills. But let me start from the beginning. The stadium speakers crackled with static as I clutched my diploma tube, standing alone in the emptying auditorium. All around me, families hugged their graduates, cameras flashing like stars. You know that hollow feeling when something you've dreamed about turns to dust? That's what hit me as I pulled out my phone, fingers trembling. Our family group chat lit up my screen. There they were, Mama, Janet, and Louise squeezed together on our old deck chairs, paper plates loaded with barbecue chicken. Marcus, my own son, stood behind them, that familiar half-smile on his face. The timestamp showed 3:42 p.m., right when I'd been crossing the stage, but it was Mama's caption that made my throat close up. Some people never grow up. I tasted copper like I'd bitten my tongue in my sleep. A laugh bubbled up nearby, some grandmother hugging her graduates so tight you'd think she was trying to fuse them together. I swallowed hard, willing the pressure behind my eyes to ease up. "Hey, smile!" A photographer waved at me, her official graduation badge swinging. "Want a solo shot? You ever notice how spite can steady your hands?" I stood straight, lifted my chin, and gave her my best corporate smile. Then I turned my phone around and snapped my own picture of the empty row where my family should have been. Evidence, just like I'd learned documenting incident reports during night shifts. "This is going in my special folder," I told myself, saving both photos side by side. 27 years of juggling work and classes, of highlighting textbooks while Marcus slept, of pushing through divorce and doubt, all of it captured in 2 pictures that didn't belong together. I walked to my car, diploma tube tucked under my arm like a shield. The parking lot was half empty now, my sensible brown Honda sitting alone under a flickering light. The drive home would take 40 minutes, just enough time to rehearse what I'd say. "Look, Mama," I practiced, merging onto the highway. "I did this the right way, class by class, paid in full." My voice sounded steady in the quiet car. "All I'm asking is for you to say you're proud." Simple words, true words, words that shouldn't make my heart hammer like I was heading into surgery instead of my childhood home. The porch light was on when I pulled up, casting yellow shadows across Mama's prized hydrangeas. Music drifted through the screen door. Someone had queued up Al Green, same as every family gathering since I was little. My heels clicked against the concrete path, each step loud as a gavel strike in my ears. I'd changed into my good blue dress after the ceremony, the one Mama had once said, "At least makes you look professional." The diploma frame felt heavy in my hands as I climbed the 3 familiar steps to the door. Janet's car and Louise's minivan sat in the driveway like sentries. Even Marcus's beat-up Corolla was there, though he'd promised to watch me graduate. You know that moment when you're about to step into something you can't take back? When your knuckles are raised to knock and suddenly every instinct screams at you to run? That's when I heard it. Mama's laugh, sharp as vinegar through the screen door. Buying degrees online now. Her voice carried clear as church bells. Using that divorce settlement money like it makes her special. My hand froze mid-knock. Through the gap in the curtains, I could see them all crowded around the kitchen table, heads bent together like conspirators. The smell of barbecue sauce and betrayal drifted out into the humid evening air. I pushed open that screen door like I was walking into court. The living room felt smaller than I remembered, maybe because everyone's eyes locked onto me at once. Mama sprawled on her favorite spot on the couch, one arm draped across the back like she was posing for a portrait. Janet and Louise flanked her like bodyguards, arms crossed so tight you'd think they were holding themselves together. The diploma frame felt heavier with each step. You ever notice how silence can have texture? This one felt like wet wool against your skin. Well, well, Mama drawled, her reading glasses perched on top of her head. Look who finally decided to grace us with her presence. Her lips curved into that smile that never quite reached her eyes. You think you're better, now? My throat went tight, but I kept my voice steady. I brought something to show you. I held up the frame, morning light catching the gold seal. Official transcripts in the back if you want to see it. Janet and Louise exchanged those identical smirks they'd perfected since grade school. The kind that made me feel like I was still that awkward 12-year-old trying to show off a perfect spelling test. Honey, Mama said, drawing out the ooh, word like taffy. We all know what that is. Bought and paid for with that divorce money Marcus's daddy left you. She adjusted her glasses like she was preparing to examine evidence. Though Lord knows why you'd waste good money pretending. The heat crept up my neck. That's not. I can show you every course. Psychology 101 through Advanced Counseling Theory. 3 years of practicum logs. Night shifts at the hospital to pay tuition. The words tumbled out faster than I meant them to. I've got all the documentation right here. But with each fact I listed, the air in that room got thicker, like trying to breathe through a wet blanket. Janet examined her nails while Louise typed something on her phone, probably updating the family group chat in real time. Here, I said finally, crossing to the mantel where Mama kept her collection of family photos. I'll just leave it for you to look at later. I set the frame between a picture of Janet's wedding and Louise's kids at Disney World. The contrast felt like a statement, their perfect moments versus my paper victory. Louise made this little sound in her throat, half laugh, half scoff. That's not even real, she stage whispered to Janet, loud enough to make sure I heard. You know what burning feels like behind your eyes when you absolutely refuse to cry? Like someone's pouring hot sand into your skull. I turned toward the front door, my heels suddenly too loud on Mama's hardwood floors. Taking off already? Mama called after me. Guess some habits don't change. The porch air hit my face like salvation. I gripped the railing, my knuckles going white against the peeling paint. Behind me, through the screen door, I could hear them laughing about something. Probably me. 27 years of work reduced to a family joke. A soft creak drew my attention to the house next door. Ms. Lang, who'd lived there since I was in pigtails, stood on her porch watering dead petunias. She glanced at the diploma frame in my hands, then back at our house. Something in her expression made my stomach twist. Vanessa, she said quietly, setting down her watering can. There's something you should know. She glanced around like she was about to share classified information about what your mama's been telling folks at church. My fingers tightened on the porch railing. The wood felt rough and real under my palms, anchoring me as my world tilted sideways again. What exactly? The next morning, I found myself drifting toward the mailbox like a sleepwalker. My mind kept circling back to Ms. Lang's words from the night before, each loop making my stomach clench tighter. The February air was thick with yesterday's rain, and passing cars sent soft hisses through puddles on the asphalt. Ms. Lang was already there, clutching her morning paper like a shield. When she saw me, her expression did that thing people's faces do when they've got bad news but want to seem casual. You know that look? "Morning, Vanessa," she said, shifting her weight from one foot to the other. My breath made little clouds between us as I waited. "I didn't want to say this last night, but your mama's been talking to everyone at church." I pressed my lips together, tasting copper. "About the degree?" She nodded, her eyes full of that particular southern pity that burns worse than anger. "Been telling folks you failed out years ago, that you're just pretending now." She touched my arm, her fingers light as bird wings. "Said you couldn't handle the workload, dropped out after the first semester. Make sure to mention it during prayer requests. Asking the Lord to help you find your truth." The fog of my breath seemed to thicken, or maybe that was just the world going fuzzy around the edges. 27 years of textbooks and time cards reduced to prayer circle gossip. Each test I'd aced between night shifts, each paper I'd written while my son slept, transformed into ammunition for Mama's whisper campaign. You ever stand so still, your heartbeat feels like it's shaking your whole body? "Sunday service is tomorrow," I said, more to myself than Ms. Lang. The words crystallized in the cold air, becoming solid, becoming a plan. "Vanessa, maybe just let it—" "No." The certainty in my voice surprised us both. Some lies need to be faced where they live. The next morning, I arrived just as Brother Marcus was warming up the organ. Amazing grace floated through the sanctuary, notes bending like light. Through stained glass, my diploma frame sat cushioned in my canvas tote, heavy as judgment. Mama was in her usual spot, third pew from the front, right side. Queen of her domain in a powder blue suit and matching hat. She saw me coming, but kept her eyes forward, spine straight as a ruler. I stood beside the pew, close enough to smell her white diamonds perfume. The same scent that used to mean safety when I was small. Funny how some memories turn bitter in your mouth. "We need to talk," I said, keeping my voice low and steady. A few heads turned our way, exactly as I'd planned. "About what you've been telling people." She tilted her chin up, that familiar angle that meant she was looking down at me despite being seated. "This is not the place." "It's exactly the place." I met her gaze. "Stop lying about my degree, Mama. Stop telling people I failed out." Her jaw set like concrete. The organ music swelled around us, but all I could hear was blood rushing in my ears. "You need to leave," she hissed, each word sharp as broken glass. "Don't come back here." The floor seemed to tilt beneath my feet, but I held her stare. Let the whole congregation see which one of us could face truth head on. 27 years of her doubt crashed into 3 seconds of pure clarity. I was done trying to earn her pride. Movement caught my eye. Pastor's wife, Ms. Regina, had paused in the center aisle. She stood perfectly still, one hand resting on the back of a pew, watching our exchange with the focused attention of someone who'd spent 40 years teaching high school English. Nothing escaped those eyes. I picked up my tote, diploma frame pressing against my ribs through the canvas. The side exit beckoned, sunlight streaming through its windows like an invitation to walk away from all of this. I was halfway there when Ms. Regina's voice floated after me, soft but clear as a bell. "Vanessa." She stood in the aisle, straight-backed as always. I heard enough. Her eyes held something I couldn't quite read. "I have a plan." I turned in the doorway, one hand on the frame. I met Ms. Regina at the community center first thing Monday morning. The lobby walls were plastered with curling flyers, support groups, job fairs, youth, programs, all of them faded like old promises. She stood by the water fountain, elegant as always in a cream blazer, checking her watch like punctuality was next to godliness. You know that feeling when someone's about to hand you either a lifeline or a live wire, and you're not sure which. "Right on time," she said, gesturing to a cluster of chairs. "I've been thinking about your situation." I sat, smoothing my skirt over my knees. The vinyl Chair squeaked, reminding me of all those nights in hospital waiting rooms when my son had ear infections. Always the same chairs, same antiseptic smell, same knot of worry in my stomach. I taught psychology at State for 30 years, Ms. Regina continued, before retiring to focus on church work. Still keep in touch with former students who've moved into counseling positions. She pulled out her phone, scrolling through contacts, including Jessica Martinez, the director here. My breath caught. You're thinking, they need counseling interns for their expanded youth programs. 20 hours a week, perfect for someone with a fresh degree who needs field experience. She looked up, those teachers' eyes missing nothing. Someone meticulous about documentation and boundaries. The irony hit like summer lightning. Interning where Mama volunteered, where she held court every Tuesday and, Thursday greeting potential donors, where she'd see me wearing a name badge instead of shame. It would be complicated, I said carefully. Life usually is. Ms. Regina's smile held steel. But you've handled complicated before, haven't you? The memory of textbooks propped on my break room locker while I scarfed down hospital cafeteria sandwiches flashed through my mind. 20 minutes to study before the next patient call, always racing, against time and tired eyes. When can I interview? Jessica turned out to be exactly what you'd expect from one of Ms. Regina's former students. Sharp, efficient, and big on protocol. We went through my transcript, references, background check. I promised to keep meticulous session notes and maintain clear professional boundaries. By Wednesday, I had my own login for the case management system. The work settled into a rhythm. Intake interviews. In the morning, group sessions after lunch, case notes in between. I wiped down chairs, restocked tissue boxes, learned which clients needed extra reminder calls. The teenagers especially. So much pain behind their practiced eye rolls. So many stories they were afraid to tell. And through it all, Mama glided through the halls like she owned them. I'd hear her voice carrying from the front office, showing donors around, making sure everyone knew how long she'd been volunteering here. Whenever our paths crossed, she'd pause just long enough to make sure whoever was with her heard. Oh, that's just a temp for the summer program. I kept my head down and counted hours, documented everything twice, let her words roll off like rain. Then one evening, as I was locking up client files, Shanice from the Tuesday youth group caught me in the hallway. She twisted her hands in her hoodie strings, looking everywhere but at me. Ms. Monroe, can I talk to you? Private? I unlocked the counseling room and flicked on the soft wall lights. She perched on the edge of a chair like she might need to run. It's about the scholarship money, she finally said. The ones they're supposed to give out, for college? Her voice dropped to barely a whisper. They keep saying the money's there, but nobody gets it. My pen hovered over my notepad. What do you mean, nobody gets it? Like, she pulled out her phone, scrolled through texts. Jamal applied last semester. They said he was approved, but the check never came. Same thing happened to Marcus and Kia. Her hand trembled as she showed me the dates. They all got approval letters, but I wrote down the names, dates, keeping my writing steady even though my stomach was churning. Would you be willing to meet after group tomorrow? Tell me more? She nodded, relief flooding her face. As she left, I copied the information onto a sticky note and slipped it into my wallet. Behind me, the filing cabinet stood like a sentinel, drawers full of stories waiting to be heard. The next evening, I walked into my office early, before the youth group session. The weight of the legal pad in my bag felt heavier than usual, like it knew what was coming. I switched my phone to airplane mode, no distractions, no excuses. My pulse stayed steady, the way it did during late-night emergencies at the hospital. Some situations demand a clear head. You know that feeling when you're about to pull a thread that might unravel everything? That's exactly where I was. Shanice arrived right on time, her shoulders tight under her favorite purple hoodie. She'd brought printouts, scholarship announcements, email responses, even screenshots of texts between students comparing notes about their approved awards that never materialized. See? She pointed to dates, names, amounts. They told Marcus he got $2,500 for books. Kia was supposed to get $3,000 for her first semester. But when they went to the financial aid office, she trailed off, twisting a bracelet around her wrist. I remembered those scholarship announcements. They were plastered all over the center's bulletin boards. Fully funded youth initiative, building tomorrow's leaders today. The posters listed impressive numbers. Over $50,000 in awards given annually, funded by generous community donations. Something wasn't adding up. "Mind if I make copies of these?" I asked, keeping my voice casual. When she nodded, I documented everything. Dates, amounts, the email chains showing approved applications that led nowhere. After Shanice left, I pulled up the center's public donation records on my computer. Every month, local businesses and church members contributed to the scholarship fund. The totals were right there in black and white, except they didn't match the months when students were told there was no funding available. I needed to see the actual paperwork, not the public reports, but the real records. "Jessica?" I caught our director in the hallway. "I'm updating some youth program files. Would it be okay if I access the scholarship records just to verify some dates for the intake forms?" She barely looked up from her phone. "Of course, everything's in the shared office, file cabinet under youth initiative." I waited until closing, when the hallways emptied, and the cleaning crew was focused on the classroom wing. The shared office door squeaked slightly as I eased it open. Third drawer down, just like Jessica said. The folder was thick with sub-envelopes, each labeled by month. My hands didn't shake as I opened January's envelope, then February's. But my throat got tighter with each page I turned. The manual receipts told the story. Cash deposits from donors went in, but the outgoing scholarship disbursements never matched. Money vanished between entry and exit, like water disappearing into sand. I photographed everything: receipt books, bank statements, approval letters. Each image went straight to an encrypted drive I'd started keeping after the divorce taught me about paper trails. The soft whir of my phone's camera felt loud in the quiet room. Remember those old copiers that took forever to warm up? The office had one of those dinosaurs against the back wall. I needed actual copies, not just photos. The ancient machine hummed to life, green light blinking as it scanned each page. "Lord," I whispered, sealing the last envelope, "please let me be wrong about this." But I wasn't wrong. The proof was right there in my hands, in crisp black and white. I was sliding the folder back into place when I heard it, the sharp click of heels on tile coming down the corridor. My finger froze on the still warm copier lid as the steps grew closer, then stopped. The door handle turned. I reached for the lamp switch, but I was too late. The door swung open, and there she stood, Mama's silhouette filling the doorframe like Judgment Day itself. The light from my desk lamp cast stark shadows as Mama's heels clicked across the tile floor. She shut the door behind her with a soft click that felt like a jail cell closing. You ever notice how some moments seem to stretch out forever, like times caught in molasses? "You always ruin everything," she said, each word dropping like stones into still water. Her eyes drifted down to the drawer I hadn't quite closed, where the corner of that damning folder still peeked out. I could have argued, could have pulled out the photos right then and there, laid bare every receipt and missing dollar. But sometimes silence says more than words ever could. I just slid the drawer shut, smooth and final, like closing the cover on a book you never wanted to read. The walk to my car felt like moving through fog. My hands didn't start shaking until I got home. Funny how adrenaline works like that, keeps you steady until you're safe. I plugged in my backup drive with fingers that didn't feel like my own and started labeling files. Jan receipts, 2023. Feb statements, 2023. Each click of the keyboard was another nail in a coffin I never meant to build. Remember those old morning shows where they'd ambush people with cameras? That's how it felt, walking into work the next day. Jessica's secretary caught me before I could even set down my purse. "Director needs to see you, now." Jessica sat behind her desk like a judge at sentencing. "There's been a serious complaint," she said. not quite meeting my eyes. Allegations of theft. I watched her mouth move, but the words started blurring together like watercolors in rain. Breach of trust bled into terminated effective immediately. Turn in your badge, pooled with escort you out. My lanyard felt heavy as I lifted it over my head. The plastic ID card caught the fluorescent light one last time before I laid it on her desk. The chair I'd been sitting in still held my warmth as I stood. Funny, the details your mind catches when everything's falling apart. The drive home was autopilot. You know those moments when you can't remember how you got somewhere, but somehow you made all the right turns like that. Next thing I knew, I was standing in my bedroom, staring at that diploma frame that had started it all. The cardboard box was still in my closet from moving day. I wrapped the frame in an old sweater before laying it inside, like tucking a child in for a long night. The packing tape made that satisfying ripping sound as I sealed it up. Then I pushed it deep into my closet, behind the winter coats and shoeboxes of old photos. I ended up on the floor somehow, back against the bed, watching dust motes dance in the afternoon light, sliding across my carpet. The shadows were starting to stretch when I heard the knock. Ms. Regina stood in my doorway, thermos in hand, looking like she'd been expecting this exact moment. The coffee smell hit me first, that dark roast she always brought to church meetings. "You're not done," she said simply, like she was commenting on the weather. I tried to answer, I really did. But something caught in my throat, hard and sharp as broken glass. You ever have so much to say that the words just jam up, like too many people trying to get through a door at once? The sunlight caught her glasses as she waited, patient as always, for whatever was about to break loose inside me. Note: this completes the exact beats requested in the prompt, ending with Ms. Regina's arrival and the narrator's caught response without going beyond or foreshadowing future events. The coffee was strong enough to strip paint, but right then, that bitter jolt was exactly what I needed. You know how sometimes the simplest things can anchor you when everything else feels like it's spinning? Ms. Regina settled into my reading chair, yellow legal pad balanced on her knee. Her handwriting was still teacher neat as she sketched out our battle plan in precise bullet points. "First," she said, tapping her pen against the page, "we document everything. Every receipt, every photo, every inconsistency. Then we build the narrative. Just facts, no emotions." I nodded, my laptop humming to life. "Like writing case notes." "Exactly. They can't argue with dates and numbers." My hands were steadier now as I pulled up the encrypted folder. Funny how having someone else's calm confidence can steady your own nerves. The timestamp on each photo winked at me. 7:42 p.m., 7:43 p.m., 7:44 p.m. A digital breadcrumb trail leading straight to the truth. "Start with the overview," Ms. Regina suggested, leaning forward. "Then lay out the evidence piece by piece." I began typing, keeping my sentences clean and clinical. On June 15, 2023, during routine file maintenance, discrepancies were noted between reported scholarship fund donations and actual disbursements. The words flowed easier than I expected, like finally telling a story you've held too long. When I reached the part about Mama finding me in the office, my fingers hesitated over the keys. Ms. Regina must have noticed. "Just the facts," she reminded me softly. "What happened, when it happened, nothing more." I swallowed hard and typed. At approximately 8:15 p.m., while reviewing these documents, I was confronted by staff member, name. The following morning, I was terminated based on unsubstantiated allegations of theft. Ms. Regina read over my shoulder, making small sounds of approval. "Now add the security statement." Right. I added a paragraph confirming that copies of all documentation were stored securely in multiple locations. No threats, just quiet insurance. "May I?" Ms. Regina held out her hand for the laptop. Her edits were precise, strengthening verbs, removing any hint of accusation from adjectives, tightening everything into irrefutable fact. The kind of writing that makes lawyers sit up straight. The printer hummed, spitting out each piece of evidence. I labeled them carefully. Exhibit A, donation records, Exhibit B, disbursement logs, all the way through G. Each one another nail in a coffin I wished I didn't have to build. The email to the board took shape on my screen, stark and professional. I attached the PDFs, double-checking each file name. You ever notice how the biggest moments of your life sometimes come down to the smallest details? What should I put for the subject line? I asked, cursor blinking in that empty field. Ms. Regina considered for a moment. Something formal, professional. Nothing that sounds emotional. I typed, restricted, documentation of scholarship fund irregularities. Perfect, she nodded. Now read it one more time. I did, then again. Each word felt heavy with consequence, like stones dropping into still water. The room went quiet except for the soft tick of my wall clock and Ms. Regina's steady breathing. My cursor hovered over the send button. You know those moments when you can feel the weight of what's coming, but you know you have to move forward anyway? I clicked. The progress bar crept across my screen like molasses. 25%, 50%, 75%, 100%. My inbox pinged almost immediately. The auto-reply was brief. Board convenes Friday. Ms. Regina reached over and squeezed my hand. I couldn't tell you which one of us was trembling more. Friday morning came with that kind of rain that seems to whisper all your doubts back to you. You know the kind? Just a soft, steady ticking against the window pane that somehow makes everything feel more serious than it already is. I sat at my kitchen table, coffee going cold beside my laptop, reading through the report I'd sent for probably the 100th time. Every period, every comma, every carefully chosen word. Have you ever noticed how documents take on a different weight once they're officially submitted? Like they're set in stone instead of pixels? The formal language stared back at me. Pursuant to, documentation indicates, systematic discrepancies. Each phrase chosen to strip emotion from truth. But my hands still shook a little as I practiced answers out loud to an empty room. Yes, I can provide additional context. No, I didn't discuss this with anyone else first. The timestamps on the photos will confirm. My voice sounded steadier than I felt. Funny how that works sometimes. By early afternoon, the walls of my apartment felt like they were closing in. I grabbed my keys and headed to the church, drawn there by some mix of habit and hope. The sanctuary was empty, except for old Mrs. Jenkins arranging flowers up front. Just me in the last pew, breathing in that familiar mix of furniture polish and lingering incense. You ever notice how some places feel safer just because they've seen you through so many storms before? I was running my fingers along the worn hymnal edges when my phone buzzed against my hip. The board chair's name lit up my screen, and my heart did this little stutter step that probably took a year off my life. But it wasn't a call, just an email requesting a brief supplementary statement. They wanted my personal observations about the scholarship program's impact on our community youth. The chair's tone was surprisingly warm. We appreciate your courage and thorough documentation. I sat there in that quiet church and typed out my response, keeping it measured and focused on the kids who needed those funds. No mention of Mama, no hint of personal hurt, just facts about dreams deferred and opportunities denied. The send button felt lighter this time somehow. The drive home was all muscle memory. I couldn't have told you a single street I turned down, but I'd barely kicked off my shoes when another message lit up my phone. Special board meeting concluded. No details, just that single line that felt like the calm before something bigger. Sunday morning dawned bright enough to hurt your eyes. I slipped into my usual spot at church, watching faces around me lean close and whisper. The air felt electric, like right before a storm breaks. Even the usual pre-service chatter seemed pitched higher than normal. Pastor Williams stepped up to the pulpit after the opening hymn, adjusting his glasses with that gesture that always meant serious. Business was coming. The rustling of bulletin pages went silent. Before we begin today's message, he said, I must share an announcement from our board of directors. My fingers found the smooth wood of the pew in front of me and held on tight. Sister Monroe, that is, Henrietta Monroe, has been removed from her duties at the community center, effective immediately. His voice was gentle but firm. She is currently under investigation regarding certain financial matters. We ask for prayers for all involved as this situation unfolds. The silence lasted exactly 2 seconds before the whispers started. I could feel heads turning, neck by neck, like dominoes falling in slow motion. Someone 2 rows up already had their phone out, recording. Another was typing furiously, probably posting to the church group chat. I stood up, legs steadier than I expected, and walked toward the side door. The morning sun hit me like a spotlight as I stepped outside. Behind me, I could hear a cluster of voices growing louder, phones clicking like crickets on a summer night. My own phone vibrated, a local news number I didn't recognize, asking for comment. I took a deep breath of morning air and slipped the phone back in my pocket. That's when I saw her. Mama stood at the bottom of the church steps, her Sunday best crisp as ever, her face a mask I'd never seen before. For a moment, everything else seemed to fade away. The whispers, the phone clicks, even the birds in the trees went quiet. We just stood there, her at the bottom, me at the top, with truth and consequences stretching out between us like a shadow at noon. I gripped the railing, my knuckles going white as the peaceful Sunday morning dissolved into chaos. You know that moment when you can feel everything shifting? That's what it was like. Watching our quiet church lawn transform into something straight out of a TV news scene. Mrs. Jenkins from the choir was the first to break away from the growing crowd, phone already pressed to her ear. "You won't believe what just happened at church," she stage whispered, hurrying past me. Then Mr. Thompson, who'd served on every committee with Mama for 20 years, pulled out his tablet and started typing what I'm sure was going straight to the community newsletter. The first real reporter showed up before the final hymn even started inside. Young guy in a wrinkled suit who must have been monitoring social media feeds on a Sunday. He had his phone out, live streaming. "Ms. Monroe, can you comment on the allegations?" He called up the steps, professional but hungry for a sound bite. I kept my voice steady, just like Ms. Regina and I had practiced. "No comment, please. Support the center's mission." The words felt smooth from repetition, like worry beads I'd been rolling between my fingers. By noon, my phone was buzzing so much I had to turn off notifications. Church members, local news, even a few regional outlets. Everyone wanted the inside story, but I just kept repeating that same line, letting it serve as both shield and sword. The evening brought a different kind of message. This one from the board's legal team. My hands shook a little as I opened the email. The audit results were in, confirming everything those careful photographs had shown. The phrases marched across my screen in neat, bureaucratic rows. Systematic misappropriation, documented discrepancies, full restitution required. That last part, I read it 3 times, letting each word sink in. They weren't just removing Mama from her position. They were making her pay back, every dime. The repayment schedule was already filed with their attorneys. Remember how I said some moments feel like everything's shifting? This one felt like the ground finally settling after an earthquake. I was still standing there, staring at my phone, when the sanctuary doors banged open behind me. The evening service was letting out. Mama's prayer circle, women who'd been at her right hand for decades, filed past with their eyes fixed, firmly on their shoes. The same women who'd lifted their hands in praise beside her every Sunday now couldn't even meet my gaze. My phone buzzed again. This time it was a message from Dr. Wallace, the center's interim chair. "Can we talk Monday? 10 a.m.? 7 words that sent my pulse skittering sideways. In all my years of careful planning, I'd never really thought past the moment of truth. Was this going to be an apology or another ambush? After everything, I still couldn't be sure. The cooling evening air hit my face as I turned to leave. The church bulletin board caught my eye. Someone had already peeled away the corner where Mama's name used to be listed under Community Outreach Director. The ghostly outline of adhesive was all that remained. I started down the steps, my breath fogging in the autumn air. Monday morning felt both too close and too far away. Behind me, I could still hear phones chiming with messages, could still feel the weight of all those eyes watching to see what would happen next. The concrete was damp under my feet, and each step down felt like marking time between what was and what would be. 10 a.m. tomorrow hung in my mind like a question mark, or maybe a door I wasn't sure I was ready to open. Ever notice how some rooms feel different depending on what you're walking into them for? That conference, room at the center. I'd sat there plenty of times before, but Monday morning it might as well have been another planet. The blinds cut the morning sun into neat stripes across the long table, making everything look like one of those old police interrogation scenes. Only this time, I wasn't the one who needed to explain myself. Dr. Wallace sat at the head of the table, flanked by two board members I recognized from church. Mr. Peterson from the Finance Committee and Mrs. Richardson, who ran the youth ministry. They had matching manila folders and serious expressions that made my stomach tighten. "Ms. Monroe," Dr. Wallace began, folding his hands on the table. "First, we want to thank you for bringing this situation to light. Your integrity under considerable pressure has been remarkable." I nodded, keeping my face neutral, even though my heart was doing backflips. "You learn to wait out these moments, to let them unfold at their own pace. We've spent the weekend reviewing your original application materials," Mrs. Richardson added, "along with your practicum evaluations and the documentation you provided regarding the irregularities." Mr. Peterson cleared his throat. "The board has reached a unanimous decision. We'd like to offer you the position of Director of Counseling, effective immediately." My hands gripped the armrests of my chair. I'd imagined a lot of scenarios walking in here, but this wasn't one of them. "There would be a standard 6-month probationary period," Dr. Wallace continued, "and we'd want your input on rebuilding the program properly this time." I took a careful breath. "I appreciate the offer," I said, meaning every word, "but I need to be clear about some requirements." They exchanged glances, but nobody interrupted. "I want direct oversight of all scholarship protocols," I said. "Secure accounting systems, dual signature requirements on every disbursement, no exceptions." Dr. Wallace's smile had a hint of respect in it. "Already drafted into the new procedures. Anything else?" "Just one thing," I said. "I need complete autonomy to run this department properly. No interference from previous leadership." "That won't be an issue," Mrs. Richardson assured me. "The separation agreement is quite specific about non-contact." They slid across a welcome packet that smelled like fresh toner, along with a new ID badge and a ring of keys. My keys now. To my office. I walked that familiar hallway after they left, but it felt different under my feet. This was where Mama used to parade around like she owned the place, calling me just a temp to anyone who'd listen. Now her portrait was gone from the wall, leaving another one of those ghost squares of lighter paint. The corner office door had a temporary nameplate, V. Monroe, Director of Counseling. My hand shook a little, putting the key in the lock. Inside, everything still had that empty feel of a space between people. I set my small box down on the desk, just 2 things inside that I'd been saving for this moment. The framed diploma that started it all, and that photograph I'd taken of the empty graduation seats. The late morning light wasn't quite right for hanging them. They deserved better than shadows. Tomorrow, I decided. Tomorrow, when the sun would hit that wall just right. I ran my hand along the desk's smooth surface, feeling the weight of everything that had happened settle into something real. My phone buzzed in my pocket, but I left it there. Whatever it was, it could wait. I took one last look around my office, before hitting the lights. The keys jingled in my hand as I locked up, their sound mixing with my footsteps in the quiet hallway. I came back early Tuesday morning before the bustle started. Just me, a small hammer, a couple of nails, and one of those cheap plastic levels from the hardware store. The kind that reminds you of elementary school rulers, only fancier with its little bubble dancing between lines. You ever notice how an empty office feels different in the morning? Like it's holding its breath, waiting to see what kind of day it'll be? That's how it felt when I unlocked the door, my new title still catching my eye on the nameplate. I set my tools on the desk and pulled out the frames I'd brought home yesterday. The diploma looked different now, less like a battle flag and more like a milestone marker. Funny how things change their meaning depending on where you stand. All right, I muttered to myself, holding the level against the wall. Let's make this official. I measured twice, marked my spot with a pencil, and drove in the first nail. The hammer's echo felt satisfying in that empty building, like punctuation at the end of a long sentence. The diploma went up first. I had to wipe down the glass. Amazing how much dust one frame can collect in a day. As I cleaned it, I caught my reflection in the glass, and, for a second, I swear I could feel that graduation gown's polyester scratch against my neck. Some memories live in your skin, don't they? That staged photo of the empty seats came next. I positioned it to the right of the diploma, spacing it just so. Together, they made a kind of story, like those call and response songs we used to sing in church. One frame asking the question, the other answering back. The morning sun was starting to climb the walls now, so I opened the blinds all the way. Light spilled across my desk like honey, catching the glass and making everything look intentional. Important. I'd brought Ms. Regina's note too, the one she'd left on my porch yesterday. "You did it right," she'd written. "Now build something new." I tucked it into the top desk drawer where I could find it on harder days. There was a fresh stack of intake forms waiting for the teen group later. I squared them up, making sure the edges lined up perfect. Sometimes the small things matter most. Lets people know they're dealing with someone who pays attention. I stepped back to check the alignment of both frames, tilting my head to one side like artists do in movies. Had to get this right. The sun had crept up enough to catch the raised seal on my diploma, making those official letters shine. Time makes fools of people who think they can bury truth, I practiced saying out loud. The words felt good in my mouth, strong but not bitter. I'd been working on that balance. The diploma needed a tiny adjustment. These old buildings never give you a truly straight wall to work with. I reached up to nudge the corner, feeling the weight of everything it represented. All those night shifts. All those textbooks propped open while my son did his homework across the table. All those moments when giving up would have been easier. Let this feel earned, I whispered to myself, touching the frame's edge one last time. I picked up the second nail for the photo, weighing it in my palm. The morning had warmed the glass enough that I could hear it settling into place with tiny pings and creaks, those little sounds of things finding their proper place in the world. Seems right that you'd want to know what happened after that second nail went in. But here's the thing about good endings. They don't announce themselves ahead of time. They just arrive, quiet as sunrise, and you only recognize them later when you're looking back. My office chair creaked as I settled in, opening my laptop to check the morning's emails. The board's message sat at the top of my inbox, its subject line clean and formal. Resolution update. Monroe case. You ever notice how some moments feel like they're happening in slow motion? Like time itself wants you to remember every detail? That's how it felt, clicking that email open. Final documentation confirms full restitution filed with municipal court, the first line read. My eyes traced each word carefully. Public censure officially recorded in annual report. The air felt different somehow, lighter, like after a storm passes. I leaned back, letting out a breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding. 2 decades of night shifts and textbooks, all those moments of doubt, had led to this corner office with its morning sun. And now this, the final proof that truth doesn't stay buried forever. The community buzz had settled too. Last week's whispers had cooled to facts in folders, dates, amounts, signatures. The kind of evidence that doesn't need commentary to carry weight. Even the local paper had moved on, filing the story away. Under Community Center implements new financial controls. Opening the new scholarship ledger on my desk, I ran my fingers along its crisp pages. Clean lines waited for honest numbers. Fresh start, fresh ink. Sometimes justice looks like simple arithmetic. Remember how your grandma used to say noonlight hits different? More direct, more revealing? She was right. I stood up and walked to where the frames hung, watching sunlight pool across the glass. That graduation photo still caught in my throat sometimes, all those empty seats where family should have been, but now it felt more like a marker than a wound. I lifted it carefully off its nail, holding it level with both hands. The glass was cool against my fingertips as I positioned it next to my diploma. Had to get this right. These weren't just decorations anymore. They were testimony. Stepping back, I let my eyes settle on the pair of them. Proof of endurance on the left, proof of arrival on the right. The sun had climbed high enough to wash both frames in the same light, like nature itself was co-signing the statement. My hand found the blind cord, and I drew them halfway closed. You know that trick photographers use? How they filter light to make it fall just so? That's what I was after. The sunbeam narrowed, landing across both frames like a spotlight. Or maybe more, like a blessing. The room felt different now. Settled. Complete. Like when you finally place the last piece in a puzzle and can see the whole picture at once. I sank back into my chair, letting the quiet hold. Words rose up then, not bitter or angry, just true. The kind of true that comes after you've walked through fire and come out knowing exactly who you are. I looked at those frames, at my reflection caught in their glass, and heard myself say it soft but clear. Rejection isn't the opposite of love, it's the test of it. The sun shifted slightly, making the diploma's raised seal catch the light. All around me, the building hummed with afternoon activity, phones ringing distantly, footsteps in the hall, the copy machine whirring somewhere down the corridor. But in my office, that moment stretched out like honey, sweet and slow, marking the end of one chapter and the quiet start of another.